So, Doctor, what is it that you're drinking?
I'm not entirely certain, Mr. Loftus. I found myself awaking this morning, and rather than stepping straight into the morning routine, which prepares me for the business of the day, asking myself, what good shall I do? I
Okay.
found myself deviating from it and entering into a place of complete vexation with every aspect of my life. It could very possibly be that the sleep of the previous night had not rendered the typical restoration. But it was at that moment my secretary, Mr. Austin, recognizing it, handed me this.
Huh.
I inquired as to the nature of this, well, small hogshead of a beverage, and inquired whether it was a liquor of some type. Mr. Austin said, in a sense, and insisted that this is resembling more of what I would take as coffee in my time, uh, which I have an episode on in my podcast. He opened the top, which bewildered me in and of itself, the innovation of this small tab here, whereby the barrel might be pierced.
Sure.
And I have sat in silent contemplation, consuming and endeavoring to identify just what form of poison I take into my body. I feel a small stimulation. I feel myself somewhat more effervescent.
Okay.
I, I feel, Mr. Loftus, a bit like I have prorogued the vexation with which I awoke, and that it will return in the afternoon with far greater fervor. Do people consume these often in 2024?
All the time. All the time. Not me personally. I'm like yourself, a coffee guy. I prefer that way to ingest caffeine, but I believe we would classify substances that alter our mental state as drugs or physiological state as drugs today. I'm not sure if they use the same sort of like if that was the same cat.
Purchased
Yeah.
purchased typically from an apothecary, yes?
Yeah, yes, most of the time. But in that drink is caffeine, which is also in coffee, and that is probably the most commonly used drug and most widely available drug these
Is
days.
it the disposition of the present, Mr. Loftus, that people exist to punish themselves, particularly their bodies?
Um, Given the knowledge that we have about our bodies, it's surprising why we act the way we do. Like the knowledge of we have so much understanding of what is good for us, and oftentimes act in the contrary. That may be due, at least in part, to today's topic. And I would like to point out how smooth that transition was, but also welcome everyone to this live stream, this Primary Source Media live stream. I am Isaac S. Loftus, as I am joined every Tuesday with the real Dr. Ben Franklin, straight here from the 18th century. We are exploring the our modern world. We are through various reactions week to week. We started with Apple TV's television show about Dr. Franklin and have progressed through several topics since then. And this week's topic is advertising, as voted upon by the audience. Now, Doctor, I had a question about the context of advertising in your time. As a printer, you're probably familiar with um, some form of advertising.
Yes, and in my time even included several ad I feel like a ghost just escaped from my body.
It'll do that to you. It'll do that to you.
Uh, in my time, I put forward several advertisements of my own. Most famously, I think, my writings upon an invention of mine called the Franklin stove, addressing the science, addressing the benefits, laying it out, but specifically taking out advertisements in the Gazette for a population who was literate not for the purposes of recreation but of necessity,
Okay.
was an essential way to diffuse the news of when public auctions will take place, when a specific ship is coming in with what goods. It was a way to relay communication and commerce, saying plainly and explicitly what and when something will be taking place.
Hmm. Plainly and explicitly. So, how was it? Was it looked upon as just sort of a matter of fact way of conveying information? It seems like it was pretty
To
like.
some extent, say, for instance, when a new shop opens, speak upon what assorted goods might be there. You see in certain gazettes, a specific merchant will open a shop at this location where this previous business was, but will sell XYZ,
Sure.
and model things like ribbons for ladies or swords for gentlemen, the various fashionable items of the time, and will speak to those goods' fashionability. In regards to things like medicine, speaking of miracle tonics that will address certain ailments and provide cures. And we all have seen the tonics that will make your hair grow back
Hmm.
and everything in between. And those advertisements you'd see scattered throughout the gazettes of the time. But oftentimes language was the method and mechanism whereby those advertisements would be communicated.
Interesting. Interesting.
And for those things that weren't language, we can remember and recall the look of signs in the 18th century, specifically tavern signs that will have a representation of what one can find. Same with peruke makers, of blacksmiths, of print shops.
Hmm.
Those signages become a form of advertising and marketing in and of themselves.
Yeah, I've actually heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of taverns and public houses were named after like an animal, like a colorful animal, like the White Horse Tavern or something like that, or the Gray Dog, or something along those lines, or the Green Goose. Partly because they could put that outside, and people who were not literate could know exactly what it was and what the name of the place is. It was a very straightforward way for people who could not read, because people are very literate now, but the percentage wasn't quite as high back then.
And it's not extended solely to fauna, but
Hmm.
equally to, for instance, coats of arms.
Okay.
The King's Arms
Yeah.
Tavern. You find that not only in Williamsburg, Virginia, but you find it in London and various other places scattered throughout the British Empire. Uh, Famous figures as well,
Oh.
because a figure who's easily recognizable by a bust or a statue or a portrait is just as effective as an animal.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, that is a form of advertising. That's interesting. That's outside of written word. I'm curious. So advertising has changed dramatically, as you might expect, as most things have, since your time. And I'm curious to see what your impression is without too much context. I don't want to tell you sort of what the current state of advertising is. I'd like to show you one. And I think this one is particularly of interest, might be of interest to you, because it contains what's called a Rube Goldberg machine, which I'm pretty sure didn't exist. The concept of such didn't exist at your time.
I don't know. It remains to be seen.
Yeah. So what it is, I'll just explain what the machine is. It's basically setting up a series of small, intricate interactions between um, mundane objects, such that they will passively interact with each other and do something at the end. So
Whoa.
a marble rolling down a slope hits a cup that falls over and then releases the next step in the machine.
It
This,
sounds wonderfully Archimedean.
yeah, very much so. I thought you might enjoy this. So, without further ado, this is I will we'll watch the ad. I'll tell you what it's for after we watch it, if it's not apparent to you, and then we can and talk about how what you think. All right, let's get to it. 1 second, everybody, while I get this set up on our end. Okay, wonderful. There we go. All right. So this advertisement has a title, has a name. It is called Cog.
Isn't it nice when things just work?
So, here, one second. Let me just switch back to our previous view. What do you think?
Join us tomorrow for a 24-hour live stream of Ben Franklin watching that. That there were a lot of pieces in that. Uh, I confess I started and began very confident because, of course, the simple gear intertwining are the mechanisms through which our clocks and watches operate.
Right.
And further moving to the principles of Sir Isaac Newton and how objects might move other objects. But eventually, I arrived in a place of such perplexity, being so unfamiliar with the technology, that I sat in just pure astonishment with a desire to watch again. I'm a man who made his career in inventions by clumsily taking apart and reconstructing things to determine how they work, but also enlisting the help of others to create the things that I envisioned in my head. And I made a comment and remark once that I wish I had been born 100 years later to see what innovations may take place. And I think there is a moment of redemption in watching this video to see just the sheer magnitude of the trajectory of human innovation, not solely for its invention, but now its practiced utility in something as superfluous as this, because it serves no purpose outside of the delight of the machine.
Yeah. It's neat and satisfying in a strange way how it all fits
And that
together
was
so
an
perfectly.
advertisement. That was an advertisement for one of your motor coaches, yes?
A horseless carriage, yes. And it's interesting how you had spoken about how when you took out advertisements, you explained the science behind something that you had created. Where this sort of doesn't do that at all. Does that strike you as interesting?
I think to some degree, because even in my advertisement for the Franklin stove, there was something explicitly stated within there outside of here is how it is different. Something that is stated within it is what is the utility? How does it help a modern person? And I think even in that, outside of the small commentary at the end,
yeah, the brief.
There is in the whole a message, I think, that can be derived of all of these pieces work to facilitate the other pieces, even when they're taken apart, which isn't a bold statement, I think, to make. But how fascinating to see something that is solely built to fascinate and entertain the attention, to get to the message at the end. Remarkable.
Yeah, oftentimes, and this is one of the ways I wanted to talk about how advertisement has changed significantly, is that oftentimes what they're selling is a feeling now, as opposed to information, and that is incredibly apparent in the next one that I would like to show you. This one, let me quickly switch to our other view here. This one is called Surfer.
He waits. That's what he does. And I tell you what, tick followed tock, followed tick, followed tock, followed tick. Ahab says, I don't care who you are, here's to your dream. The old sailors returned to the bar. Here's to you, Ahab! And the fat drummer hit the beat with all his heart. Here's to waiting.
What?
Here's to waiting.
Were those horses?
Those were horses. The waves were horses crashing around. And it's almost not quite apparent exactly. So here, I'll explain the rationale behind the idea. And I'm still sort of parsing out the meaning of the narration, because it has nothing to do with anything that's taking place other than it's sort of about the sea, and about a bar, because so Guinness is an ale. It's a stout alcohol.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's what it's advertising. It's actually from Ireland.
Well, they could have, Mr. Loftus, they could have been so much more explicit. I've partaken of a number of fine stouts, and they could have said simply, Guinness, a stout that makes you want to fight horses.
Yeah. So what they're doing in there is surfing, which I don't think existed in your time, probably. But we can get to that on another day. But the idea behind this is that I think they're talking about the patience of a surfer waiting. It has to wait for the right wave to ride, right? They can't ride, like they can't surf on any wave. So there's a level of patience involved in the process of doing that. And Guinness, because of the kind of stout it is, actually takes longer to pour than other beers, other ales. So it's basically saying that waiting is a good thing. Good things come to those who wait.
And if you spend a lot of time surfing, good things come to those who wade.
Wade, yes. Yeah, exactly. With horses. So that was very, but you can see how it's sort of conveying a feeling and an idea that has nothing to do with the product at all.
Does Guinness contain bits of real horse?
I think there is some fish in it, but no horse.
Fish in it?
Fish, yes. I think there is some fish byproduct in traditionally brewed Guinness, but I'm not 100%, or at least the original recipe, but I'm not 100% sure. We'll have to defer to our resident vegan, Dr. Lynn Price Robbins.
She'll tell you that it has chard in it.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's made with chard. Oh, Lynn's catching strays. She's not even in the chat. Okay, so what I wanted to do is show you one more, and then I would love to, if we could, devise maybe a slogan for one of the devices that you've created, based on sort of modern. Like, if we were going to advertise it to a modern world, we can potentially, try to brainstorm what one of your inventions,
one of your modern startup companies.
Yeah.
For
We're
one of my
do a startup, yeah, and we're gonna have like what's the slogan for it. So here's the last ad that we're gonna watch. It's a particular favorite of mine, mostly because it came out. I remember this when it aired, and I thought it was very entertaining. It does. We got some people exclaiming shock that Guinness has fish in it, and yes, it contains a fish byproduct called isinglass, which sounds like something from Lord of the Rings.
I'm unfamiliar.
We can do Lord of the Rings on another episode. All right, 1 second. I will switch over to our share screen here. Apologize for the little bit of jankiness to the audience. All right. Here we go.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if he stopped using lady-scented body wash and switched to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down. Back up. Where are you? You're on a boat with the man your man could smell like. What's in your hand? Back at me. I have it. It's an oyster with 2 tickets to that thing you love. Look again. The tickets are now diamond. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
And that's it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's a. Let's say your initial reactions to the Old Spice commercial, which is a soap.
So
A soap, yeah.
there was a degree of alchemy in that, Mr. Loftus. Oysters to tickets to diamonds, all obtainable through the marvel of soap. Is it a scented soap, like an eau de cologne?
Yes, it is a scented soap. Yes, it is.
I have been to some places, Mr. Loftus, where the very presence of a pleasant smell is a mercy worthy of alchemy.
I don't know if I want to ask what those places are.
Paris,
just generally speaking.
generally.
Oh,
Place
that's
that is
unfortunate.
rife with both affluence and negligence. That was remarkable. That was I think in there was something somewhat timeless. And I know. Did you intend to put so many horses in it? Are horses pervasive in modern advertising?
Now that you point it out, more so than they are in other aspects of modern life, to be honest. We don't use them for travel really anymore. We don't use them for work as much anymore. So I guess this is their, outside of recreation, this is almost their primary purpose, is to be featured in advertisements.
I think you all miss horses more than you admit.
That may be true. They are really. I don't encounter horses very often because we don't use them, but they always strike me in how big they are.
According to that second ad, perhaps if you go to the ocean more, you would see them.
Yeah, I would see a lot more horses. Apparently, I don't live terribly far from the ocean. I should go check. But
just can you approach the nearest lifeguard tower and proclaim, "Hey, you got any horses in the water?"
Point me to the nearest horse. So we've gotten word that Guinness actually, in the first time in 256 years, has changed its recipe. Oh, that's actually interesting. That Guinness was actually around, is a contemporary drink of yours. It probably wasn't available in North America, but they had started brewing a similar stout during your lifetime. I did not know that.
There was a time I had a habit of sitting under my mulberry tree at my house in Philadelphia, my new house. And there was one instance where convened a meeting of gentlemen prior to the Constitutional Convention, where we held council, and I opened up a barrel of a newly arrived stout to the newly independent states. And it's not remarked whom provided the stout, but perhaps there is some overlay. I did not take specific name of the brand, but then again, advertising was not what it was.
Right. Could have been. Maybe we should reach out to Guinness to see if you want to be in an ad.
If they wish to sponsor it. This episode is accidentally brought to you by Nose.
Nose. All right. So I think so those provide a couple different advertisements that are pretty different from each other and how they approach selling the product at some level. So I'm curious if that might give you any inspiration. So which of your inventions would you like to potentially build?
The first one that came to mind, and this was somewhat easy, was my flexible catheter.
Oh, okay.
Because we could simply call it your number one solution.
Oh no!
No?
That is great. First of all, explain this flexible catheter to those who... we talked about it once on our reaction when we were talking about the television show.
Yes, I suffered for some time. Well, my brother suffered for some time from obstruction of stones, both gall and kidney. And I created for him a particular device, a catheter, to not only ease the discomfort, but to provide gradual solution, which would inevitably come in handy when I suffered from the vexations that we witnessed in the Franklin TV series. But obviously, that doesn't have the same appeal that some of the products utilized in these videos had. So you'll pardon me for my crass humor on that.
I have seen commercials for catheters. I have mostly on
Oh,
daytime news.
but I think I'm still moving into the literary mechanism of advertising in my time. So let me see if I might drum up. Let me see if I might drum up something of my own invention, a modern commercial for one of my devices.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Travel with me, people of 2024, to the Benjamin Franklin cinematic experience. The camera pans tight to a dog, mangy, hungry, adorable. The dog next to a horse to accommodate this modern fixation and obsession.
You gotta have a horse.
The horse holds in his mouth the riding whip from the carriage driver. The dog looks up imploringly as the horse drops the riding whip. The dog picks up the riding whip, rides away. We don't see what the dog does next. The dog leaves his yard, frustrated, moves out and finds a duck. The duck holds in his bill river cane, drops it. The dog picks it up, travels back. We don't see where the dog goes. The dog leaves frustrated. The dog finds a pig. The pig holds in his snout a long stick, drops it before the dog. The dog picks it up, travels back. Dog returns again, frustrated. We have a tight shot of the dog whining, frustrated, when he sees in the window pane a large rod of metal. A handsome shirtless man steps out, sees the dog, and looks out, travels with the dog to where the dog lives, and we see a newly constructed doghouse with discarded rods and sticks about. It's at the time the handsome man realizes what the dog is doing and places a Ben Franklin lightning rod at the dog's house. We then fade to black, and then fade to a modern home where my lightning rods sit scattered throughout the city, and then the phrase, lightning rods, keep the roof over her head.
I think you have a knack for this.
I'm a press man. Certain things don't change.
I think producer Pat, if we can't change the thumbnail for this episode to a spoof of the Mad Men logo with this as press man with the silhouette of Franklin. Can we get Jordan working on that? Because that would be a good one. I'm very into it. But I love that. That's great. I was even thinking of I think I could see it. It has all the conventions of like a modern ad. It's just nonsensical enough to not make sense in a good way. In terms of the dog, why would the dog's house have a lightning rod? Because it's so much shorter than the other everything around it. Potentially, right? It wouldn't necessarily attract lightning directly, but I like it. I was even thinking of that. What's the glass harmonica?
Oh, the glass harmonica. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you ever? I'm curious if you've ever seen, because you've been to the opera. Have you ever seen an opera singer, or was it commonly known that opera singers could break glass with their voice?
Reach a certain decibel level, the glass might be shattered.
Yeah. That was. I'm curious if there was something to do. Like I don't have quite like the story planned out, but that was where my mind was going.
Well, if we wish to speak of the durability of the product, perhaps a commercial where after a series of operatic catastrophes where a particular soprano shatters different types of glasses, we then have an instance where she hits the highest note and then cut to the glass harmonica who hits a higher note.
Oh,
thus showing its durability and its ability to match the music.
I like that. I like that idea. I was thinking of less durability potentially. Maybe, what if it was, let's say an opera singer has lost her voice. We don't know what she's going to do, but the show must go on. But behind the curtain is you, sort of with a glass harmonica, playing, because the sound is so pristine that the discerning audience cannot tell the difference between the famed opera singer's voice and the sound.
My dear sir, we should go into business one with the other. We would clean up.
Yeah, I think so. Well, all right. anyone in the chat, anyone who's watching, please leave a comment below if you want us to try to come up with ads for any of the other doctor's other inventions, and we'll make some social content and post those ideas. But I wanted to thank you again, Doctor, for joining me for this conversation. And as always, every week, this conversation is brought to you by our supporters over on Patreon. So please go check out patreon.com/primarysourcemedia. You can get early access to content, exclusive stuff, even like book giveaways for some of the historians that we interview on my podcast, Too Complicated for History. All sorts of cool stuff. So go check it out. You can also join for free to get access to our Discord. We're always having fun historical conversations. Please go check out the Doctor's podcast, Let's Be Frank, which is currently airing revolutionized, remastered versions of his season 1 on this very YouTube channel, which is pretty great. What was the last episode that had aired?
The last episode was on Ascending Honor, which is talking about the Society of Cincinnatus and the notion of honor being hereditary.
Interesting. I'll have to give it a listen. That is a relatively foreign concept in our modern lives, I think, but I could be wrong.
I think you'll find some curious connections that you did not realize were still ever present in our lives.
My instinct is to say it's not the case anymore, but I can feel that I'm incorrect at the same time. But
that's a remarkable way to preserve your dignity.
Yeah. No one has ever accused me of not being what's the term? Wishy-washy. I am large. I contain multitudes, and I disagree with myself often. But please go check out the Doctor's podcast wherever you can listen to audio versions wherever you listen to your podcast. It's called Let's Be Frank, and he also has a Patreon, which is at patreon.com/ what's the URL?
Let's_be_Frank.
Yeah, if you'd like to join his Junto and participate in the conversations and building of that future podcast. So thank you so much again, Doctor. I'm looking forward to our conversation next week. On a horse. We should be on horses.
Well, naturally.
All right. Thanks, everybody.